The cold metal handcuffs closed painfully and humiliatingly around Isabella Hernandez's wrists. She stood upright, her back to the tall, wide glass wall of Terminal 2 at the San Diego International Airport in California. The bright white lights reflected off the glass, but they couldn't pierce the shadow that surrounded her. Her elegant, perfectly tailored suit and the discreet designer leather purse lying at her feet, her silent power and grace seemed meaningless under the rough hands of the two young police officers standing before her. Officer Ryan Mitchell, the older and clear leader, stood with his arms crossed, his thin lips curled in a sneer of mockery and disdain. His blonde hair was shaved close, and his cold blue eyes scanned Isabella from head to toe, pausing deliberately on her expensive clothing and luggage. Beside him, Officer Ben Thompson, younger and less experienced, tried to look tough, but his eyes were filled with worry and insecurity, only knowing how to stay in line and back up his partner. Let's see, said Mitchell, his tone condescending and prejudiced, loud enough for a few passing travelers to glance over with curiosity before quickly moving on. Designer clothes, that crocodile bag. You must be making a lot of money, ma'am. He emphasized ma'am with unhidden sarcasm. I know your type. You look unusually successful. Smuggling something in? Or is this contraband merchandise? He looked down at the purse at Isabella's feet as if it held incriminating evidence. Thompson echoed him quickly, though his voice was a bit shaky. Right, Ryan. Looks suspicious. Why would someone like her have so many expensive things? Isabella Hernandez remained perfectly silent. She showed no fear or panic. Instead, her dark, piercing eyes calmly scanned her surroundings with the intense focus of a seasoned investigator. She caught every detail: the flush on Mitchell's face, the number Milk 38 on his badge, Thompson's unease, badge number 1205, their exact positions in the vast terminal, the angle of the ceiling-mounted security cameras, the indifferent or curious reactions of the other travelers, then their hasty departures, a sad, complicit silence. Loudspeaker announcements of arrivals and departures echoed throughout the terminal, mixing with the rolling wheels of suitcases on polished floors. The distinct scent of jet fuel hung in the air. In the rush and bustle of one of the world's largest international airports, the contrast between the woman's elegant, strangely calm appearance in handcuffs and the rude, aggressive, prejudiced attitudes of the two young police officers became even more glaring and painful. Mitchell seemed unsettled by Isabella's silence and composure. He stepped closer, lowering his voice in a falsely friendly manner, but his words were laced with thinly veiled threat. Listen, ma'am, he said, his cigarette breath wafting into Isabella's face. We can take you to the airport precinct right now. Search everything you've got. Run a background check. You know the paperwork here's a mess. You might have to stay a few days, miss all your business. He paused deliberately, staring into Isabella's unwavering eyes. Or, Mitchell continued, his tone blatantly conditional, we could make things a whole lot easier, nicer, for both sides. Isabella remained silent, but her eyes turned cold. She knew exactly where this was going. Just a little goodwill. From you, Mitchell went on, licking his dry lips, revealing his greedy nature. A small gesture to help smooth things out. Think of it as a no-hassle fee. He looked around, as if afraid someone might hear, though his voice was still loud, enough for Isabella to catch every word. How about $1,000 in cash? That's not much for someone as elegant as you, right? He gestured toward the small wallet in Isabella's purse. Just give us the money, and we'll pretend none of this ever happened. We'll forget all the suspicions. Take the cuffs off right away, and you'll be free to go wherever you want. No one will know. No one will notice. Quick and easy, right? Mitchell's face was full of smugness. He was sure he had the upper hand, that this wealthy Latina woman alone would be frightened and obediently hand over the money to avoid trouble. Ben Thompson stood beside him, his face still tense but also expectant, already dividing the cash in his mind. A decent haul for two low-ranking cops. What had begun as racism, abuse of power, and unlawful handcuffing had now escalated into something far more serious, an attempted extortion, soliciting a bribe directly in the middle of San Diego International Airport. Two young officers, blinded by greed and prejudice, had no idea they'd just dug a hole deep enough to bury their own futures. Minutes earlier, Isabella Hernandez had cleared immigration and picked up her small suitcase from the baggage carousel. She had just completed a long flight from Geneva, Switzerland, to attend an important international conference on cybersecurity and global counterterrorism. As the director of one of the world's leading intelligence and law enforcement agencies, her presence at the conference was highly confidential. On her return trip, she had chosen to fly commercial as a regular passenger, accompanied only by a few aides and security agents who maintained a discreet distance distance, as she had instructed. Isabella wanted the chance to observe the procedures and security operations at a major airport like San Diego without the usual preparations for high-ranking officials. She was dressed elegantly in a suit by a famous designer, but in a classic, not overly flashy style. Her purse and suitcase were also designer-made, but discreet, with no obvious logos. She wanted to blend in, not draw special attention. But perhaps it was the unusually successful appearance of a middle-aged Latina woman traveling alone that caught Officer Ryan Mitchell's eye. As Isabella walked toward the taxi stand outside the terminal, she was stopped by Mitchell and Thompson. "Excuse me, ma'am, we need to see your ID," said Mitchell, his tone initially professional. Isabella stopped calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Random security check," Mitchell responded curtly, his eyes scanning her clothes and luggage with scrutiny. "Please show me your identification." Isabella pulled her driver's license from her purse, a valid form of ID that did not reveal her true position. Mitchell took it, examined it unnecessarily, and began asking questions that went far beyond the scope of a routine check. "Where are you from? What's the purpose of your trip? Why are you traveling alone? What's in this luggage? What do you do? What makes you look so rich?" His tone grew increasingly insolent and prejudiced. Isabella answered the questions patiently, briefly, and appropriately, but began to feel more and more uncomfortable with the clearly racist attitudes and questioning. "Officer," she said, her voice still calm but now slightly firm, "I don't understand why you're asking me these questions. I've presented proper documentation. If there's no valid reason to detain me, please let me go." "A valid reason?" Mitchell scoffed. "We suspect you may be carrying illegal goods. We need to search your luggage." "On what grounds?" asked Isabella, looking him directly in the eye. "Do you have a warrant, or at least a specific probable cause?" Isabella's direct and legalistic questions seemed to enrage Mitchell. He took it as defiance and a challenge to his authority. "That's enough!" he shouted. "Your behavior is suspicious. Thompson, cuff her. We're taking her to the station for questioning." Ben Thompson looked hesitant, but under Mitchell's stare, "You have no right to do this," Isabella protested, her voice now sharp. "This is abuse of power and unlawful detention." "Shut up," Mitchell yelled. "What do you think? About rules and regulations? Where did you get the money to dress so fancy? Must be illegal." He turned to Thompson. "Cuffs!" And so the cold handcuffs were fastened tightly around her wrists, from Isabella Hernandez's wrists. Throughout the process of being detained, rudely interrogated, searched without cause, and finally handcuffed illegally, Isabella Hernandez showed no signs of fear or weakness. Her mind, trained by decades of handling the most dangerous and complex situations, was operating at full capacity. She wasn't just a victim, she was also a master investigator, silently gathering evidence. When Mitchell made his blackmail offer of $1,000, Isabella wasn't surprised. She had anticipated it based on his behavior and earlier hints. She remained silent, staring directly into Mitchell's eyes, not out of foolish defiance, but to give him more time to dig himself deeper into the hole. Her silence only made him more arrogant, more talkative, providing more evidence against himself. "What? Don't have any money, or don't want to cooperate?" Mitchell lost his patience with Isabella's unsettling silence. "Fine then. We'll go to the station. You'll have to explain everything there." He turned to signal Thompson to get ready to escort her, probably to the airport police station or some quieter place to continue the pressure. That was the final straw. Isabella Hernandez knew it was time to act. She had irrefutable evidence of a string of crimes: racial profiling, abuse of power, false arrest and handcuffing, and now a blatant extortion scheme. It was time for these two young officers to face the real consequences of their actions. It was time for them to learn just how fatally wrong they had been. Just as Ben Thompson's hand touched Isabella's arm to push her forward, she spoke. Her voice was surprisingly calm, but there was an underlying current of authority that made both officers flinch. "I need to make a phone call," said Isabella clearly, word by word. Ryan Mitchell smirked mockingly, his arrogance not yet completely gone. "Go ahead, call now. Who are you calling? Your lawyer or your boss to pay the ransom?" he continued, mocking, unaware that the situation was about to shift entirely. Isabella ignored his words and repeated her request, her tone allowing no refusal. "I need to call my deputy director." "Deputy director?" Mitchell and Thompson looked at each other, frowning in confusion. "Deputy director of what?" asked Mitchell again, his voice still condescending but now tinged with curiosity. "What company do you work for that has a deputy director?" He still assumed she was some kind of businesswoman, probably engaged in shady deal. "Give me my cell phone, please," Isabella demanded firmly. "It's in the zippered compartment of my bag." Thompson hesitated, looking at Mitchell for instruction. Mitchell, perhaps thinking it wouldn't hurt to let her make a call, maybe even thinking she'd try to arrange a payment, shrugged and motioned to Thompson to do it. Thompson bent down, opened her designer leather bag, and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. It didn't look like much on the outside, but it was actually a government-issued communication device with the highest level of encryption. Thompson handed the phone to Isabella, and though her hands were still cuffed, she skillfully managed to touch the screen. Whether it was voice recognition or a special gesture code, the screen lit up, and a call was made almost instantly to a top priority number. Ben Thompson, following Isabella's signal, held the phone to her ear. The other end picked up immediately, a deep, professional male voice. "Marcus, it's me, Isabella," she said into the phone, her voice now completely different, no longer that of a passenger, but of a supreme commander. "I'm at San Diego, Airport Terminal 2, near Exit 7. She paused for a second, looking at the two officers, who listened in growing confusion. "There has been a serious security incident involving two local police officers here. Names: Officer Ryan Mitchell, badge number 1138, and Officer Ben Thompson, badge number 125. I have been handcuffed without my consent, and they just attempted an act of extortion." Her voice turned colder, sharper. "I need the rapid response. Team from the San Diego FBI field office at my location immediately. Notify Special Agent in Charge, Maria Rodriguez. Priority classification, level 1. I repeat, priority level 1. Mitchell and Thompson heard every word. Marcus, Isabella, FBI office in San Diego, lead agent Maria Rodriguez, priority level 1. The names and terms were like alarms ringing in their heads, especially the word FBI. Their expressions shifted rapidly from confusion to full-blown panic. Who was this woman? Why was she calling the FBI? How did she know the name of the special agent in charge? And what exactly did priority level 1 mean? A sense of unease, an undefined fear began to creep into their minds. Isabella ended the call with a brief, "Understood, Marcus. Stand by for further instructions." She motioned for Thompson to lower the phone, then turned, locking eyes with Ryan Mitchell, whose arrogance had completely vanished, replaced by rising fear and confusion. "You," Isabella said, her voice ice cold, each word cutting into Mitchell's growing panic like a knife, "have just made a very, very serious mistake." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "You have illegally handcuffed, insulted, and attempted to extort the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." The final words, "director of the FBI," hit like thunder on a clear day. Mitchell and Thompson stood frozen in place, completely still. Their mouths hung open in shock and horror. Their eyes widened, staring at Isabella as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. The color drained from their faces in an instant, leaving only the pale, sickly white of pure fear. They looked at the woman standing in front of them, the expensive suit that no longer hid her authority, the terrifying calm in her behavior from beginning to end, and now the unbelievable but undeniable declaration, "Director of the FBI." This woman is the director of the FBI, Isabella Hernandez, the head of the most powerful federal law enforcement agency in the United States. No, impossible. It had to be a joke, a mistake. But the commanding tone of her voice, the names she had mentioned, and especially her extraordinary composure from the beginning to now, all of it showed it couldn't be fake. Ryan Mitchell was trembling all over. His voice stammered. "No. You're joking, right, Mom? Please tell me you're joking." He almost wanted to run forward and remove the handcuffs from Isabella himself, but his feet were frozen to the floor, unable to move from fear. Ben Thompson stood like a statue, his pale face blank, his whole body shaking. He looked from Isabella to Mitchell, his mind drowning in a vast emptiness of horror. He realized he had just taken part in something terrible. He had helped his partner handcuff and attempt to extort the director of the FBI. The consequences of that action were unimaginable. The fatal mistake had been exposed, and the fate of the two young officers was sealed the moment they decided to detain the elegant Latina woman. Less than 10 minutes after that fateful call, an incredibly short time, given the absolute priority and efficiency of the a stir began to form at the end of the hallway. A small group of about 5 or 6 men and women, dressed in plain clothes but radiating professionalism, determination, and an invisible authority, moved swiftly and in perfect coordination toward Isabella Hernandez and the two petrified police officers. They moved as a single unit, their sharp eyes scanning the growing crowd of onlookers who instinctively stepped aside to make way. Leading the group was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a tailored dark suit. It was Special Agent in Charge Maria Rodriguez, the head of the FBI's San Diego field office. Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson had probably seen her photo or heard her name during interagency security briefings at the airport. The presence of someone of such high rank confirmed their worst fears. Rodriguez walked straight up to Isabella Hernandez, her face showing a mix of concern and barely contained anger at seeing her superior still in handcuffs. "Director Hernandez," she exclaimed, her voice filled with respect and concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" The other FBI agents quickly dispersed, forming a discreet but effective perimeter around the area. Their cold, piercing gazes settled on Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson, assessing the situation and ready to act on command. The atmosphere grew intensely. Intense. The presence of real power was palpable. Still handcuffed, Isabella Hernandez had regained her commanding demeanor. She responded calmly to SAC Rodriguez. "I'm all right, Maria. No injury. But these two officers are in serious trouble." She nodded toward Mitchell and Thompson, who were now pale and shaking like leaves, unable to lift their eyes toward the FBI agent. Following the director's gaze, Rodriguez turned to face the two officers, her eyes burning. She didn't need to ask any more questions. She gave a firm order to her agents, her voice full of authority. "Disarm these two officers immediately, their badges and radios. Detain them for processing." Two large, well-trained FBI agents immediately approached Mitchell and Thompson. The officers made no attempt to resist. They were too stunned, too frightened, and entirely paralyzed by the overwhelming federal presence. The sidearms, extra handcuffs, radios, and police badges they had once worn so proudly were swiftly and professionally removed by the FBI agents. Another agent approached Isabella Hernandez. "Excuse me, Director," he said, and carefully used a special key to release the cuffs binding her hands. The soft click of the cuffs marked the end of Mitchell and Thompson's brief illusion of control and the end of their careers. Once freed, Isabella gently rubbed her slightly reddened wrist, then turned to Rodriguez and began giving clear, concise instructions, demonstrating the absolute authority and expertise of the FBI director. "Maria, seal off this area immediately. No one except our personnel and authorized staff is to enter or leave," she ordered. "Collect all surveillance footage within the incident zone from the moment I was detained until now. Have it analyzed immediately by the tech division. Confiscate the radios and any personal recording devices those two officers may be carrying. In particular, check if they're wearing body cameras. If so, that would be extremely important evidence. Identify and log any passengers or airport personnel who witnessed the incident. Your team will take their statements later. Contact the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California immediately. Inform them of the incident and request a prosecutor to be sent to the scene." Rodriguez and the FBI agents complied and quickly carried out their assigned tasks. Sergeant Al Garcia, the airport police supervisor for Mitchell and Thompson's unit, had also been notified and rushed to the scene. His face turned pale upon seeing the chaos. The director of the FBI was present, directing federal agents, while two of his subordinates were disarmed and restrained. Sergeant Garcia stammered as he tried to apologize to Isabella Hernandez and SAC Rodriguez, but he was clearly in complete shock and unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson, fully aware of the inevitable and terrible consequences awaiting them, job loss, criminal prosecution, prison time, began their desperate plea. "Director Hernandez, please forgive us," Mitchell cried, tears and snot running down his face, his image as a police officer completely shattered. "We were idiots. We were wrong. We didn't know, really. We didn't know it was you. Please give us a chance to make it right. We're young and inexperienced with our whole future ahead of us. Please don't ruin our lives." Ben Thompson also sobbed. "Yes, Director, please have mercy. We were just following a bad habit. We promise we'll never do it again. Please." Isabella Hernandez turned to look at the two men, crying and begging. Her eyes were cold, without a trace of mercy or hesitation. "You're not wrong for not recognizing who I am," she said, her voice calm but powerful, cutting through their pleas. "You're wrong for abusing your position and authority. You're wrong for acting on racial prejudice. You're wrong for illegally handcuffing an innocent citizen. And you're guilty of a serious crime for intentionally attempting to extort money from the person you were supposed to protect." She paused, letting her words sink into the panicked minds of Mitchell and Thompson. "This last-minute regret cannot erase those actions. Now remain silent, cooperate with my agents, and wait for the legal process to take its course." The director's words were a premature verdict. Mitchell and Thompson knew that any further pleading would be futile. The tide had turned, the wheels of federal justice were in motion, and they were firmly on the tracks. Once the scene was fully secured by the FBI agents, the case involving officers Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson was swiftly transferred to full federal jurisdiction for investigation and prosecution. This decision was made not only because the victim victim was the FBI director, but also because the nature of the crimes, serious civil rights violations under color of law and conspiracy to commit extortion, were both federal offenses under U.S. law. The Assistant U.S. Attorney, AUSA, for the Southern District of California immediately took over the case. This sensitive and high-profile case was assigned to David Chen, a young prosecutor known for being sharp, decisive, and with a strong track record of handling cases involving corruption and abuse of public power. AUSA Chen recognized the significance of the case, not only for the victims, but also to restore public trust in the integrity of the law enforcement system. He quickly worked closely with the FBI's investigative team, led by SAC Maria Rodriguez, to build an irrefutable case file. Meanwhile, the Port Authority Police Department launched its own internal investigation into Mitchell and Thompson. However, under the immense pressure of the scandal and the overwhelming initial evidence provided by the FBI, the internal inquiry was rushed. Both Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson were immediately suspended. Their terminations became official just days later. The police badges they once wore were permanently stripped. In addition to losing their jobs, Mitchell and Thompson faced a legal storm from the federal government. Based on preliminary evidence and the testimony of Director Hernandez, a formal arrest warrant was issued by a federal court. The two former police officers were arrested by FBI agents and taken into federal custody to await their first court date. The FBI investigation was thorough and professional. They left no stone unturned. Video analysis from security cameras clearly captured the entire incident from multiple angles inside Terminal 2. From the moment Mitchell approached Isabella Hernandez, through the tense exchange, the illegal handcuffing, and the attempted extortion. Although audio was not available, the actions and gestures were unmistakable. Device verification was crucial. Fortunately, or unfortunately for him, Thompson had activated his body camera as required, but may have forgotten to turn it off, or simply didn't believe it would record his misconduct. The audio and video footage from the body cam became the most powerful evidence, capturing every racist and derogatory remark, and most importantly, Mitchell's offer of $1,000. This was irrefutable evidence in the case. Witness testimony. The FBI took a formal statement from Director Isabella Hernandez. She described the incident calmly, objectively, and accurately, without exaggeration or personal emotion, giving her testimony special weight. Maria Rodriguez and other FBI agents present at the scene also testified about the director's condition upon their arrival and the process of subduing and disarming the two suspects. Sergeant Al Garcia, Mitchell and Thompson's supervisor, was also called to provide background information on the two former officers. Several passengers and airport employees who witnessed the incident were also located and interviewed, corroborating the victim's account. Record verification. The FBI conducted a disciplinary background check into Mitchell and Thompson's previous police records. They found that Mitchell had several informal complaints regarding intimidation and discrimination, though none had led to serious disciplinary action. Thompson had a cleaner record, but was noted as being easily influenced by his peers. Thompson's testimony. Facing serious federal charges and irrefutable body cam evidence, Ben Thompson, on the advice of his attorney, chose to cooperate with the prosecution. He agreed to plead guilty to lesser charges and provided a full and detailed account of the entire conspiracy and Ryan Mitchell's action, admitting his own involvement. Thompson's testimony further weakened Mitchell's defense. After gathering sufficient evidence, AUSA David Chen formally presented the indictment to a federal grand jury. The grand jury, after reviewing the evidence, voted to indict Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson on serious federal charges. One of the charges, violation of civil rights under color of law, a crime targeting the abuse of power by a law enforcement officer to intentionally deprive a citizen of their rights, of their legal rights, in this case, freedom and equal treatment. 2. Conspiracy to extort under the Hobbs Act. This offense criminalizes conspiring to or committing an act of extortion that interferes with interstate commerce activities. Since international airports are considered part of interstate commerce, the crime applied. Mitchell's defense attorney, now facing a much tougher situation because Thompson had chosen to cooperate, attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid trial. However, AUSA David Chen, with support from the Department of Justice and fully aware of the symbolic seriousness of the case, rejected any form of disproportionate leniency. He was determined to bring both men to trial before a jury so that justice could be served openly and transparently, and to send a strong deterrent message to anyone who might might consider abusing power or engaging in corruption within law enforcement. The path to justice had been opened. Mitchell and Thompson now had to prepare to face a federal trial where their fate would be decided. The trial of former police officers Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson took place a few months later at the United States District Court for the Southern District of California, located in San Diego. The case attracted intense media and public attention, not only because the victim was the FBI director, but because it touched on the deeply sensitive issues of racism, abuse of power, and corruption in law enforcement. The courtroom was filled with reporters, members of the public, and activists. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen, had prepared an exceptionally strong case. They presented the evidence systematically and logically to the 12-person jury. Airport security footage was shown, clearly depicting the two defendants stopping, searching, and handcuffing Isabella Hernandez. The most critical evidence, however, was the audio and video captured by Ben Thompson's body camera. When the footage was played, the courtroom fell completely silent. Everyone listened to Ryan Mitchell's racial slurs, and especially his brazen offer of $1,000. This was irrefutable evidence that directly undercut the defense's narrative. The prosecution's star witness, FBI Director Isabella Hernandez, took the stand. She appeared in formal business attire, calm and professional in her demeanor. She recounted the entire incident clearly, coherently, and accurately, down to every detail. She showed no agitation or personal emotion. She simply laid out the facts, both as a citizen whose rights had been violated and as a key witness in the case. Her calm, integrity, and authority left a powerful impression and almost absolute persuasion over the jury. Her testimony was unshaken by the defense attorney's cross-examination. FBI agents who were at the scene that day also testified, confirming Director Hernandez's condition upon their arrival, the panicked behavior of Mitchell and Thompson, and the evidence collection process. Ben Thompson's testimony, as part of his plea agreement, was also presented in court. He admitted to all of his misconduct and that of his team, especially Mitchell's central role in orchestrating the extortion scheme. The defense faced an almost impossible task. Ryan Mitchell's attorney did his best to minimize his client's guilt, arguing that Mitchell had acted based on a misunderstanding, under pressure, in a high-stress environment like an airport. He claimed that the money offer was a moment of poor judgment, a stupid joke, rather than a deliberate attempt at extortion. He also tried to question Thompson's motives for cooperating with the prosecution, suggesting that Thompson was simply trying to blame Mitchell to save himself. Regarding the civil rights charges, the defense denied any racial bias, arguing that the words were merely said in the heat of the moment. However, all these arguments fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence, especially the body cam recording. Ben Thompson's attorney focused on his client's inexperience and the fact that he acted under the orders and pressure of his more senior teammate. He emphasized Thompson's cooperation and remorse as factors in requesting a reduced sentence. After the closing arguments from both sides, the jury retired to deliberate. Their deliberations didn't last long. After just a few hours, they returned to the courtroom. With a unanimous verdict, the jury foreperson stood and read the verdict aloud. We, the jury, find the defendant Ryan Mitchell guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act. We also find the defendant Ben Thompson guilty of violating civil rights under color of law and guilty of conspiracy to extort money under the Hobbs Act. Ryan Mitchell turned pale and collapsed onto the table upon hearing the verdict. Ben Thompson closed his eyes, accepting his fate. Justice had been decided. The sentencing hearing took place a few weeks later. AUSA David Chen once again emphasized the seriousness of the case, the betrayal of public trust by those sworn to protect it, the reprehensible racial discrimination, and especially the brazen extortion scheme. He requested a severe prison sentence for both defendants to ensure deterrence. The defense attorneys made final pleas, citing their clients' remorse, the burden on their families, and their potential for reform. FBI Director Isabella Hernandez was also present at the sentencing hearing and gave a victim impact statement. She did not focus on her personal pain, but on the broader damage caused by actions like those of Mitchell and Thompson to the entire law enforcement system. When those who wear the badge abuse their power out of prejudice or greed, she said, her voice calm but firm, they do not just harm an individual, they erode the fragile, hard-earned foundation of trust between police and community. Today's sentencing must send a clear message that integrity, justice, and respect for the law are non-negotiable requirements chance for anyone who serves in law enforcement. Finally, the federal judge who presided over the trial delivered her verdict. She looked directly at the two defendants standing before her. "Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson," she began, her voice stern. "You were entrusted with a sacred duty to uphold justice and serve the people. Instead, you chose to abuse your power, act on racial prejudice, and attempt to enrich yourselves by extorting money from a fellow citizen. Your actions are a disgrace to the badge you once wore and a stain on all honest law enforcement." She emphasized the abomination of extortion, especially when racially motivated. "Your actions are not merely a singular crime, but an attack on the very foundations of the rule of law society we live in. They demand a severe and fitting punishment." Therefore, the judge declared, this court sentences defendant Ryan Mitchell to 12 years in federal prison. This court sentences defendant Ben Thompson, in consideration of his cooperation but not ignoring his active complicity, to 8 years in federal prison. It was a harsh sentence, reflecting the gravity of the crimes they had committed. Mitchell and Thompson were handcuffed and escorted out of the courtroom by federal marshals to begin their sentences, bringing a bitter end to their brief and scandalous law enforcement careers. The sentencing of Ryan Mitchell and Ben Thompson sent shockwaves through the public and especially the community. Across the nation, the case became a harsh reminder of the terrible consequences of abuse of power, racism, and corruption. It affirmed that no one, regardless of the badge they wear, is above the law, especially when facing the full force of the federal justice system. The Port Authority Police Department underwent extensive internal reviews. A series of reforms were introduced, including increased oversight, changes to hiring procedures, and retraining of the entire force in ethics, anti-discrimination, bias recognition, and appropriate use of force. The incident also prompted a more serious adoption and use of body cameras in other police departments. The reputation of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Director Isabella Hernandez personally was further enhanced by the case. Her calm and professional handling of the situation in the face of abuse of power, combined with the swift and effective response of the federal agency and their determination to pursue justice to the end, earned strong public recognition. The case highlighted the power and necessity of a federal law enforcement agency with the authority and resources to investigate and prosecute serious misconduct, even when it involves local law enforcement officers. Back at work in FBI headquarters, J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, Director Isabella Hernandez sits in her large office, looking out the tall windows toward the Capitol and the Washington Monument. She had just finished a tense meeting about a new counterterrorism strategy. She felt no joy or triumph over the downfall and sentencing of the two young former officers, only relief and the quiet satisfaction that justice had been served fairly and firmly. The San Diego incident was a painful but necessary personal reminder of the ongoing challenges faced by America and law enforcement, underlying racism, the potential for abuse of power, and the temptation of corruption. She knows the struggle to build a law enforcement agency that is truly honest, just, respectful of human rights, and that serves all people regardless of race or background is long and difficult, but she is not discouraged. The incident has only strengthened her resolve to lead the FBI with integrity, justice, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. She will continue to work to ensure that those in positions of power remain aware of the great responsibility that comes with it and are held fully accountable for their actions. Isabella Hernandez took a deep breath and returned to her desk, where stacks of files and reports awaited. She picked up the phone, made another call, and continued her mission to protect national security and deliver justice to the country. The true satisfaction did not come from punishing the wrongdoer, but from believing that the system, imperfect as it may be, was capable of self-correction and protecting its core values. Human dignity and rightful authority had ultimately prevailed in that unequal confrontation at the airport that day, and that was what mattered most. Thank you for taking the time to hear this story. If you enjoy this kind of content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next meaningful story, because tomorrow we'll have another one just for you.